jumping in.
No problem.
So Tashi will just begin with introductions, and I think I've briefed everyone what we're going to talk about. So yes, we are ready. So you're talking to a lot of women out there, guys. So
yes. Okay. So hi everybody. Welcome to the session. We are now live, and I'm Tashi. I work with Lakshmi, and Lakshmi is India's first financial platform for women. Sorry, I think there's a lot of disturbance from Kaushik.
yeah.
Okay. All right. Sure. So today we are going to talk about cryptocurrency. I think we have received a lot of interest, and so is everyone. This is exactly what everyone is talking about. So should your investment portfolio really have cryptocurrency in it? Should you be investing in cryptocurrency? If yes, how do you go about evaluating where to invest, and how much should you invest, and what should you be expecting from this investment in cryptocurrency? And of course, to have this very, very exciting discussion, we have the best from the industry. We have Naimesh, who is the founder of CoinCrunch India. We have Sharan from Kuber CoinSwitch, and we have Sid from WazirX. And of course, we have Preeti Rathi Gupta, who is the founder of Lakshmi. So yes, Preeti, do you want to kickstart this?
And we have Tashi, who has been part of Lakshmi's journey since that Lakshmi started, and she heads marketing right now. So thanks, Tashi, for that. Great. Thank you guys for joining in. Like I said, this session is for our community of women our community has been buzzing with talk of cryptocurrency, and we just thought that it is right for us to bring information to the women who are looking or talking about investing into cryptocurrencies. Lakshmi does not offer cryptocurrencies, but I think in the gamut of investments, we just feel that it's important to talk everything that women are choosing to put their money in or thinking about putting their money in. So let's do a quick icebreaker, okay? So I want all of you to just spend 2 minutes in telling us, how did you even get into this space? So Sid, we'll start with you. Why cryptocurrency? Why WazirX? And when? I think you're on mute. We can't hear you.
All right. Sorry. So the WazirX journey was much later than what my journey with crypto was like. So I think back in 2000, maybe 12 or somewhere during that time, we had this IIT professor who used to come over to my office, right, again. And he started talking about Bitcoin. He said, this is this internet money. This is how it works. And I was like, how does it even have value? And these are the basic questions I was basically arguing with him. And it was quite fun because that's exactly when it struck me that there is the concept of money, because he was trying to explain it to me. He was like, what is money? Money is basically a belief system, etc. I was like, what are you talking about? You are from IIT, but probably you lost your mind. But nevertheless, that's when I started getting it gotten more interesting. And I think in 2013 I started doing some bit of mining. Couple of years here and there. It was like free money. Wow, it's so amazing, right? Like, so everybody wanted to do that. I bought a few Bitcoins when it was say $10,000 to $20,000. I bought a couple of them. And then later in 2017, it was like when it was close to 40 to 60,000, I sold them. I was like, wow, this is my best investment, or the first investment and the best investment. And I was very happy about it. And then it did not stop there. It just went up. I think it just crossed 1 lakh, 2 lakhs. I don't know. And somewhere I bought something back again, obviously at a very high value. But then the whole concept of Bitcoin is something that I've been reading during those times, trying to understand it. And during the 2017, when we have a lot more exchanges coming in, when even I got more serious about it, I realized the whole, the India space lacked a good technology partner, a good product, if not nothing there. So that's when we decided, we want to do something here. I convinced everybody in the team saying, hey, let's start this as a side gig and, try something out. And we became very serious day by day. And within 20, 30, I think within 30 or 40 days, we actually launched WazirX. And when we started, we had a lot of josh, everything, and the day we launched, I think within 20 days is when RBI announced saying, hey, there is a banking ban coming, which basically stops us crypto exchanges to have a bank account. So probably not a great start, but that's when we realized, what do we do? Like, should we be very serious about it and fight this out, or should we just shut shop because it's just 30 or 40 days old, right? Like it's just 30 days old, and that was a deciding moment for us, saying, hey, you know what, we are in it, and we are going to be very serious about it, and let's start solving this, right? And that's how we started committing a lot more to Pozirex and to this space.
Great. Amazing. Sharan.
Sometimes I wish I had a better story to tell. However, the truth is, I started my crypto journey back in 2014. I joined UnoCoin, which just got started. The truth is, I knew nothing about Bitcoin, even when I joined the company, right? It was just my genuine hatred towards my other opportunity. It was selling SIM cards in Airtel. That led me to take a lower package and move to a company which was a startup, and I had no freaking clue what Bitcoin was, to be honest. That's my start. My first job was to call up people and say, hey, do you want to know about Bitcoin? And because I had to do that, I had to learn about Bitcoin, right? Because you can't tell people about Bitcoin if you don't know what it is. That's how I went through the pain of reading the white paper, and there was very less material out there, right? But very fortunately, because there was very less material, there was no SEO-based material for Bitcoin yet out there. I was able to go deep into Reddit threads, and I was able to go deep into the community. Back then, I forgot the name of the Bitcoin forum. Nobody talks about it today, right? That's where all the gem was there. So all of my learnings came from there. And because of that, I at least see it beyond the price. The price, because roughly at that time, like what Sid mentioned, the price was, 10,000 rupees? Right? And nobody was really talking about the price back then, right? There weren't enough people back in 13, 14 wanting to invest in cryptocurrency. So it was always talking about uncensorable money that cannot be, put under regulation. A lot of our discussions were around that. Fast forward, I moved out of UnoCoin, joined CoinSwitch back in 2018. Very interestingly, very interestingly, a month later, they decided to close down bank accounts, the same instance that Sid mentioned. Lucky for me that CoinSwitch was not in Indian markets. CoinSwitch was building a global product from India, which was basically into crypto to crypto. So we didn't get affected. The only problem was a lot of people thought I knew about the ban. Because why would someone leave? Unocoin was one of the top companies back then, right? Why would someone leave a job at a large company, go work for a company that nobody heard of? Back then, Unocoin was just a team of 4 or 5 people. Right? Like he should have known this in advance. But yeah, so that's been the journey. Then CoinSwitch was mostly into international business, did crypto to crypto, build APIs for a lot of crazy wallets that you could think of today. And when the banking ban got lifted, we realized that, hey, Bitcoin, like my dad doesn't know how to buy Bitcoin. It's difficult for him. So we wanted to build a retail product that would make it easy for anybody, maybe people at Lakshmi tomorrow, right? Without having to go through the whole pain of complexity and sophistication, have access to one of the best investment assets out there. So that's the journey.
Yeah, I think old habits die hard, right? The calls that you were making, you're making them here as well.
Yes.
Great. Namish, CoinCrunch, how did that happen?
It's more or less for everyone, the story is the same, right? There isn't enough information out there, but you heard about Bitcoin, so you start looking it up, and then I think I got in because I was like, okay, someone told me. So someone told me, I used to work with Deloitte, and someone from Deloitte told me that Deloitte is researching on blockchain and cryptocurrencies, or rather Bitcoin, in 2017, around July, August. So I started looking into it. By September, I had bought 100 rupees worth of Bitcoin on UnoCoin because UnoCoin was giving 200 rupees worth of Bitcoin for free. So So I was buying 100 rupees worth of Bitcoin on UnoCoin. Bitcoin was around 2.5 lakh rupees. And then I joined one WhatsApp group somewhere, and they told me about. There was one guy who said that I have 3 Bitcoins because somebody paid me my fees in Bitcoin, and Bitcoin they paid me when Bitcoin was 1 lakh, and now it's like 2.5 times the profit. And I was like, okay, so what do? I don't have 1 lakh rupees or 2 lakh rupees to even buy 1 Bitcoin at this moment, right? So they were like, just keep and hold, right, or keep on buying. So that's how it started. But then I also wanted to know more, and I have never been a fan of forums. Right, I am a guy who likes to read articles or watch videos that are like single page things, right? Like not like read something and then read the comments and understand from it. I wasn't like that. So I was looking for articles. I did not find much in India, and then I started writing. I started learning from sites that I found. I started giving it my own flavor, started writing it on my personal blog, which was finallyjobless.com, because I had just quit my job. So I started writing on it, and it started getting a lot of traction. And people wanted to know, right? People wanted to know what is happening in India, how to buy their Bitcoin, why are the exchanges working the way they are, why are there so much fees, right? So and fortunately, it was the beginning of the 2017 bull run. So it became quite popular. So I created CoinCrunch as a business out of it, rather than writing it on the same blog. To be honest, I still think that maybe Finally Jobless could have been converted into a crypto blog and it would have worked well. But fine, wherever we are, we're enjoying this, and that's how the crypto journey, the CoinCrunch journey started.
Great. I think, and Kashif and I spoke sometime back, and he was telling me how he made loads of money and then lost that money and then realized that he's better off just writing about it, right, Kashif? I think that's where you come from.
I hope my voice is clear now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so my story is a little different. So there is no university or college from where you learn crypto. So the first rule of this industry is that there is no college, there is no degree, there is no teacher, there is no mentor, there is no coach. The only coach, only mentor in this industry is your experience, right? And my experience was on a bitter side. So what happened that I was working fine with one of the companies. So I have close to 15-16 years of experience in sales and marketing. And while I was trying to figure out a way of earning additional incomes, most of the people in India, they try to do that while they are in their jobs. I just figured out this technology which one of my friends recommended. And initially I ignored. Initially I said it looks like a Ponzi scheme. But then I listened to Sandeep Goenka, the founder of ZPay. And I was quite impressed with that guy, the way he narrated the story from evolution of money to Bitcoin. So I got a little flavor of that, okay, fine, this technology is going to stay here. Then I did a lot of research. So my first purchase was for 10,000 rupees. And when I ended up researching 2016, I took a personal loan. And that too, it was in 6-figure personal loan. And so I took that loan and I bought Bitcoins. And after buying those Bitcoins, I invested it in a Ponzi scheme. And during that time, that Ponzi scheme was promoted by best of names. So I don't want to take a particular industry because tomorrow I might enter into that industry. You never know. But best of names were promoting that. I got a little influenced and I invested in that Ponzi scheme, and that Ponzi scheme ran away. So the only thing which I had in my pocket was loan and EMI, and that EMI was eating close to 50% of my salary. And there was this depression and all that thing which happened in 2017. I decided to not look back at crypto. But then 3-4 months later, I figured out that if I can be cheated, so imagine how many people could get affected. So I decided to share my story. And while I was trying to figure out how to recover my money, I met one advocate who later on became my co-founder. So because he was an advocate, I was from crypto. So we thought, why not to build something called Crypto Qanun? And we built that platform, and that platform turned out to be quite popular because of certain reasons that we tried to present the right education. And also the turning point in our career was that when we did a live coverage of the RBI versus crypto case from the Supreme Court of India, and that was like 700 tweets in the span of 15 days we did from our Twitter handle, which became the mouthpiece of the crypto industry for the world. So that is it.
I thought your name is taken from Andha Kanun. Good, you clarified that it's come from.
So it was not like that. It was like we were sitting on my co-founder was sitting at one point, and he said that I have just got an amazing name. I said, what? He said Crypto Kanun. I said, go for it.
Great. Super. So now let's just dig deep into what we are here to talk about. So thank you everybody for just sharing your journeys and backgrounds.
I would also like to add in. So how I came to know about crypto for the first time, I was actually on a date with this guy who kept talking about blockchain and Bitcoin and investments. And at that point, I had no idea what he was talking about. I was completely lost. And I was just like, okay, that's great. Okay, it's another form of investing. Later on, I did some research and I was like, okay, let's try to invest a little. This was, I think someone mentioned, right, 2017, which was when the bull run started. So I invested very little at that time. And after a couple of weeks, I was like, you know what, I'm going to pull out my money because I still don't understand what this exactly is. So yeah, that's been my journey. And that guy obviously is very rich by now. So
are you still dating him?
Sorry?
No.
Are you still dating him?
No.
Great. So let's dig in deep. I think a lot of our audience has heard of crypto but don't really know what it means, right? And guys, all of you do a lot of sessions which is meant for the people who really know what you're talking about, and I've been part of those conversations. Some of it even I don't understand, right? So we have to go really basic here, and I think for our audience, just Sid, to begin with you, what is cryptocurrencies and what are the different types? I mean, between Bitcoin and altcoins, how does a layperson understand what this is, and how is the price of these cryptocurrencies determined? I mean, a lot of the conventional investments, there is demand, supply, there are underlying whatever. And I think we've heard all along that, okay, cryptocurrencies, there's no underlying. So, you don't know where the price is coming from. So just a basic understanding of how this, what is it, how is the price determined, background, etc. Again, you're on mute.
I guess old habit dies hard. Okay. So again, the word cryptocurrency, right? It does not really justify what it stands for. Like, for all we know, Bitcoin did start with the name cryptocurrency. It was used for, making payments, and in some sense, even today. But there are a lot that has happened over time, right? So it has evolved a lot. The way I would look at it is, tokens. I would probably put a better name to that as tokens or token economics or everything around it. Now, there are different types of them. There are a lot of types, but let's classify them, right? The basic ones are a token which is used as a currency, as a mode of payment. So you can use that as a payment. Typically, the economics behind this is more of inflationary, in the sense the value of that token should actually go down. Only then it's a good form of payments method, right? If it is a deflationary economy for that, then the chances are you will not spend that money, which is bad for the economy, right? So that's why you have most of the currencies which is always inflationary. Then you have, probably tokens, which is more security tokens, which is more like the stock market that we understand, where you have a piece of the, the share or some holdings in the company, right? So that's one type of it. And then comes, the most popular one. The one is the utility token, which is more like the token being used in the ecosystem, more from an utility point of view. I'll come to that. And then there is store of value that is there. So you have these, store of value is more like, like how would have a digital version of the gold, or let's say a digital version of, silver, right? And the characteristics for that is primarily it's more deflationary in nature, because it is bound by a limited supply and things around that. And also the utility one would have its own characteristics, and that depends completely on product to product, right? Project to project. So these are four major classification that I can talk about. And obviously there are a lot more. Let's not get into it. Now coming to the value of how to find the value of a token, and it's a very interesting thing because this we are talking about a network here where everybody is trying to judge their view of what the value should be, and some people, most of the people agree on like 2,000 being a good value. Some people say 64,000 is a good value. So it's a varying number right now. But here, I would want to take an example of Ethereum as a project, right? It's something that you all know about, and I think it'll be very easy. Back in 70s and 80s is when you saw a boom of, operating system. What is operating system? Windows, Linux, all these things are operating system. And what has happened is we saw a boom of centralized apps like Facebook, like Twitter, like anything that you can think about. The whole internet is working on these centralized apps, and the whole internet is basically working on Linux or Windows servers. And what that means is this is the foundation for anything to run on. So even if today you have Facebook being run, it's actually run on the Linux machine, which basically executes your program. Similarly, the whole evolution of the centralized app happened. Now we are in a verge of starting of something called as decentralized app, where your programs are executed on the network, not on one machine, and which meant you have to rethink the way things work, and that is where Ethereum comes in, right? Ethereum is actually called as EVM, which is called Ethereum Virtual Machine. Basically means it is a machine that is on the network. And it's just decentralized. It's not working on one machine. It's just working on the network, right? So by network, and today we have a lot of decentralized apps being built on top of it. Now, what happens is to execute these programs, to execute these decentralized apps, you need something called as gas, to execute this in the network, because you need to execute it. Somebody has to get paid, right, for executing this, and this gas essentially needs Ethereum. So if you think about it, Ethereum is needed to pay the gas to execute these codes. And now if you realize what Linux was to this, to Facebook, to the whole internet that we know of till now, right? Or to Instagram, everything. This is exactly, and that's exactly how I see what Ethereum would be to the whole decentralized revolution that we are, sort of going through, right? And if decentralized apps are going to be very big, exactly what the real value of Ethereum can be, right? Because to run them you need Ethereum. So that's how you sort of understand from a value perspective what your numbers should be, and it's completely on you, right? Because I can see a big industry being growing right now, so my value would be very high, and what I'm seeing right now is at a discount, but that can vary person to person, and that's what the market is all about. So that's my take on it.
Great. And so how do you explain Sharan, maybe you could answer that for us. So all these price movements, particularly, what we are seeing for the past couple of days, right? The big falls, and then you see a big rise, and the volatility. How is that explained then? Because I think from what Sid is saying is essentially that it is perceiving a future value. But then what sort of, makes this price volatility so much?
I'd like to add to that. I think from what Sid said, right, my understanding is that, and I may be wrong, I'd like for you to correct me, is that I'm betting on a technology, right, which in future is going to be booming. And of course, people who are investing, they see a lot of value in it. So how is it also then different from, what makes it a currency? How is it different from me betting on blockchain?
Can I answer that?
Good.
So since our audience is quite new, and I'm sure they must be what I was in 2016 and what Naimish would have been in 2016. So basically, we need to first understand this concept is that, if we go to our primitive age, where there was those early man and we were evolving as a human, when we were evolving as a society, as a tribe. So during that time, when the human was born, so we had different continents, different cities, different geographies. God has designed our world in such a way that God has not given everything to everybody. So one continent is good in something, one continent gets mango. So in India, if you see, mango is somewhere else, lychee is somewhere else, apples are somewhere else. So what does that mean? God somewhere wanted humans to interact socially and economically. In two ways, God wanted human to interact. Because if we wouldn't have interacted with each other for our necessities, we wouldn't have grown as a society. As a human being, if we would have isolated ourselves in one city, so why Vasco da Gama would have went out in the world to search for new places and new people, right? So what I'm just trying to say, during those times, the only way we could interact with each other was a barter system, right? That I have apples and you have fish. Okay, I need fish and you need apples, let's exchange. But this barter system had a problem, right? So the problem was that if suppose I want fish and you have apple, right? But you don't want fish and I want apple, right? So this problem was called double coincidence of wants. So basically, one thing was for sure that
Kashif, you're making this very complicated for people on the platform to understand. I think you have to make it very simple. I think what you're trying to say is essentially that this is something that can be a replacement for barter. Is that what you're saying?
No, it is not a replacement for God. It is like that, just a second. I'll just put my
Not God, I mean barter. Yeah.
Yeah, just a
You
second.
have thoughts to explain? Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
I think Sharan, in the meanwhile, if you could just just explain to us the price and volatility angle to it, because I think that's been very, it is, I think, especially when you're a smaller investor and you're putting in your savings, etc., it really bothers you, right? So they really want to know why does this volatility happen? Why is, the price just like?
I think any asset class, right? Bitcoin is now today considered as a store of value. Basically, it does two things, right? The price will either go up or come down. So I'm generally very surprised when people find that weird. However,
So let's just say steep volatility, right? Compared to, I mean, we used to call equity volatile, and risks. When you get into equities, you should know the risks, right? So similarly, I think post Bitcoin, we have been talking about equities being a safe asset class.
I think the volatility of any asset class or anything, as a matter of fact, is a function of human behavior, right?
Yeah.
For example, when you look at gold in the past, right, it kind of reflected the same kind of volatility that you see with Bitcoin today, right? And it took a long time for gold to be like kind of stable the way you see it today. Bitcoin would, I mean, if you would have been in 2013-14, I remember there was a day it dropped to zero, right, in between. So that volatility that you see then is slowly diminishing and then would eventually kind of stabilize over a period of time, but it wouldn't be that volatile. However, to answer your question as to why do you see such steep volatility, it's primarily because most investment or asset classes that you see are heavily regulated, right? So there is always some sort of protection built around it. With cryptocurrencies, what really happens is because today it's unregulated, the kind of people entering it are of very varied backgrounds, right? So there are seasoned people, there are get-quick-rich people, there are people who want to scam off other people, right? So sometimes you see a price drop when you discover a scam, right? Or you see a price drop when someone uses ransomware, right? At the same time, you see the price go up when a country or someone like a Tesla says, oh, we're going to accept Bitcoin, right? It's always a function of human behavior. I think that's going to stay for a while. Also, the volatility of cryptocurrency is a double-edged sword, right? What keeps a lot of people away, volatility keeps a lot of people away from it, but it also certainly brings a lot of people in. I mean, if there weren't volatility, trust me, none of us would be talking about Bitcoin right now, right?
Great.
So,
yeah. No, I mean,
one more reason also for volatility is because we are quite new. Bitcoin is just 10 years old. So we need to understand that, the number of people who are into Bitcoin is quite less, number one. Number two, the market cap of Bitcoin is only 1 trillion. Try and understand that the market cap of gold is 10 to 12 trillion and the entire fiat is 300 trillion, right? So we are just an asset which is 1 trillion. So anybody who puts in $1 billion into it, so suddenly you see a spike. Or if somebody sells a $1 billion, suddenly there is a drop. So earlier what used to happen in 2016, I remember that if somebody used to put in $10 million, there used to be a volatility. But now if today somebody puts in $10 million, it doesn't have any effect. So the moment the market cap of Bitcoin grows, the price of Bitcoin grows, the volatility will eventually fade out. So so we are new. There are less number of people, and the market cap is quite less. So even $1 billion dollar can move Bitcoin quite sharply.
So does it mean that it is at the risk, the way we say it in traditional conventional financial markets, is it is at the risk of being cornered?
So what happens, Preeti, over the period of time, you take any currency or any money during the evolution stage, every money or every money which has gone through these stages have seen volatility. There was a time when gold has also seen volatility. There was a time when fiat currencies have also seen volatility, and today they have been such volatile in Venezuela, Zimbabwe, that they are not even considered to be fiat of that country. So people are rather dealing in dollars rather than dealing in Zimbabwe dollar or a Venezuelan own currency. So currencies are also volatile. It's just that because Bitcoin is quite new, so you can see some volatility in that case.
Yeah, actually, Kashif, to your point, I think I've been in the currency space for some time, and I know that when currency futures were started in India, a 10 paisa movement in a USD INR was a big movement, right? It was like, oh my God, it has moved so much today. And I think the volatility, in fact, over a period of time has only increased. Even in the USD INR. So to your point, I just feel that in conventional currencies, I think volatility over the last 5-10 years, as we've become more and more global, I think it's increased to a very, very large extent. I think, Nimish.
It's also a power move, right? By now countries are devaluing their currencies against the dollar. Because they see that they were for so long being manipulated, and now they have enough resources at their hand to sort of get away from the dollar. So see, but that's political, right? When it comes to Bitcoin,
there is managing the currencies for sure, and I think Bitcoin is, or cryptocurrency, or for that matter any centralized digital currency, is meant to sort of take out all of these inefficiencies of the market, right? And we will talk about this in terms of the future of cryptocurrency. But because you guys brought up, and I think Sharan, you brought up the point of unregulated, I'd love to, ask what does an unregulated market mean for an investor as well as for platforms like yours, right? Also, specifically, when it is unregulated, what does it also mean for the entire ecosystem? That means that are all platforms at par. That means, there are, and every day, trust me, I get a mail every day. The minute I have cryptocurrency mentioned on my Twitter or my LinkedIn, I suddenly start getting mails that, okay, this is a new exchange and why don't you buy? And now there's no cost to it, etc. So how does that sort of, for a person who's looking at it from the outside, what does it mean for them? And what does it mean for platforms like yours, Sid, Sharan? And I think I'd love for Nimish and Kashif also to come on this, in this. And also because there's a lot of talk about this, because crypto, just the whole space has become very active. And I think, therefore, people are talking about it. I remember when you say 2012, 13, 14, it was still a little too early. And I think the viewpoint was that there's really hardly any money in it. So, it's just like there are chit funds, there's like cryptocurrency, right? But I think now it's become a sizable, a lot of people, when I'm saying in our community, our women want to put money in. So then in this current scenario, what does being unregulated mean?
There's a saying, right? Beauty lies in the eye of the beholder. In cryptocurrency, it's pretty much like opportunity lies in the eyes of the beholder, right? An unregulated market, you either see an opportunity or you see a risk. And sometimes it's a combination of both. It completely depends on do you want to enter it or not, right? However, to add to that point, one of the things that I find very amusing is people getting so worried about it being unregulated. Tell me one thing which was not unregulated when it started. Like one thing, internet, cab aggregation services, e-commerce platform, right? Drones, everything was unregulated. You cannot expect a regulator to build regulations for things that they are not, they can't foresee in the future, right? The process of regulations is always as a small spark. Regulators still don't care about it. It's too small for them to look into it. There are better things to do. It grows in size, then it outgrows in size, then it brings in a lot of people, and then it becomes extremely important for the regulators to then look into it. right? So every time I hear someone say, "Hey, it's unregulated," what do you think? I'm like, what do you expect? It is
No,
supposed to.
my question is more from the perspective of investors as platforms like yours. I think it puts a lot of pressure even on platforms, right? When you're
That's true.
unregulated, actually there is a self-onus that one has to put, because and it also means that there are good apples and bad apples, right? So how are you sort of dealing with that space? And then
Right.
also for an investor, for a person who's looking at it, what does it mean for somebody who wants to put their money in, right? And I know you compare it to e-commerce, etc., but really it wasn't investment money. It was really saying, okay, if I bought something, I may not get it if it is unregulated, or if there are drones, then it may interfere with a lot of things that I'm living in. But here people are really putting in their savings, etc. So what does it mean for those people?
Sure. Fair enough. I think one of the first things is that today, today we're seeing light of regulations happening everywhere, right? Today there's more pro crypto conversation happening even within the country as compared to what it was in the past, right? And obviously, once regulations come in, life becomes easy. But the severity of the regulations or the importance of that completely depends on what you're doing. Like you rightly mentioned, right? E-commerce doesn't have to worry that much, right? Ola and Uber probably didn't have to worry that much. But what are you disrupting, right? Cryptocurrency is probably disrupting everything that you see in finance today, right? Every product that is built on finance. And I think I was telling Namish on a phone call a couple of weeks back, every single product on finance will get disrupted and will have an equivalent in decentralized finance. So the severity increases. As an exchange, it's a very pressured job, and Sudhu will agree. I think we just had a conversation even 10 minutes before we got on this call. I keep telling people that I'm 25, I look like 35, and I feel like 45. Right? Because you don't wake up like it's so challenging that you wake up every morning with something going wrong or something going right. It's you go through a lot of mood swings, right? You're always in mood swings, right? But as an exchange, we understand one thing, right? We're building a financial product, right? I've had enough calls from customers who have lost their money, people who have put their educational fund onto it. And I am pretty sure, say that we all agree to this, that we have that moral responsibility when we wake up in the morning of what we're trying to build, right? And I think that is what keeps us building things which will keep the bad fish out of this, right? All our efforts as exchanges to come together to build a self-regulatory code goes in that direction to show the regulators that, hey, listen, there is a way to clearly demarcate what a good player and a bad player looks like. We're going to set the standard so high that it's not going to be easy for a bad player to kind of pick up to that. As far as investors are concerned, if you're that worried about, first of all, you should not be investing anything that you're willing to lose, right? And the moment you come with that mindset of not wanting to invest anything you're willing to lose, then it completely breaks down into your risk appetite. What do you want to risk, right? Like for a very long time, I would always advise my dad not to invest, right? Because his age, if you consider, is this the kind of risk appetite he should be taking at this point of time? I wasn't certain, right? I think it all depends on your risk appetite, the kind of background you come from. But if you're just trying to put your money in to get rich, you will be the first one to leave the door. I can promise you that.
Okay, that sound advice. Yeah, Nimish. Yeah.
I was reading the chat as well, and I just want to add one thing here that at the end of the day, right, when something is unregulated and when you decide to invest in something that is unregulated, all you have to do is understand that it's risky because it's unregulated. That's all. Like, it's not that hard to understand that, right? Like, if I come to you and tell you that this is an investment opportunity, but it is not regulated by the government, you will probably say, then I don't want to invest in it, right? Or you will say, okay, fine, chal mera bhi 100 rupees dal de. That's how it goes, right? It's very simple. So now you've seen, then when you start researching, you see that it's not regulated in India. So fine, invest in it because there's a good opportunity for you, but also manage that risk, right? Don't do what a lot of us has done. In fact, what Kashif Bhai has done, right? That don't take a personal loan and create a liability for yourself because you think that we will make a lot of money from it, right? So that's how you invest in cryptocurrency, and that's the only crux out of being unregulated is, right? As long as it is unregulated, there's an opportunity. Afterwards, there is the opportunity window shrinks, okay, to make money.
That's not true. Come on. I think regulated would make it a lot more interesting. I think you'll get a lot more participants, and there will be some sort of. I know it's a dichotomy when we talk of cryptocurrencies and blockchain, and then we talk about regulation. It is a dichotomy, but I think when it becomes an asset class is where I guess there will be concerns, and I think. Sid, your viewpoint on that in terms of what does it mean for exchanges? I mean, what is the pressure of due diligence that you have to do, because every customer that you're taking on board, there is a lot that you have to also do.
Right.
Also, sort of, even an investor, right, looking to choosing of platforms, right? How does an investor do a due diligence as well?
Right. I think, it goes without saying, right? Like, we are in a market which is unregulated as of now, but we all, as an industry, want that, it should be a healthy growth for all of us. Because we are all in here for something big, not for something, we just want to start something and shut down tomorrow. So we want to grow this industry. And as an industry, when we do that, there's a lot of things around it. First, if there is no regulations, what we do, we try to model what is the closest, cousin to us, the other financial products that we have. And we as an industry, not just WazirX, as an industry, have come together trying to understand how this works, got in experts, and try to do self-regulation. And this is not something that is an act that was done probably a year back. There's something that we've been doing it for almost 2 years, right? There's been talk about it, how to do KYC, what's the right way to do KYC, what's the right way to do bank verification. So every sort of things have been, jotted down. If that was not the case, we would have seen a lot more, bad actors in the system. And no doubt, even in the banking system, you do have bad actors. So there are a little bit of here and there people who do that. And we are very prompt in acting on it, right? We have dedicated team who works with them, who works with authorities and everybody around it, trying to understand, even trying to educate the, different types of authorities, right? Because they don't know what they're dealing with. They don't know. Sometimes they might get a wrong signal and, do something else. But this is where we work together, and then we try to make sure that, overall, we are trying to maintain and trying to build a healthy industry rather than, building just something quickly and just make money, right? So from all those perspectives, even in terms of getting regulation done, we are in talks with governments in whatever form, whatever way we can. There are a lot of more forums that has been opened up where we do a lot of discussion. So in general, it's not an easy path, like how Sharan said. It takes time. It has its own time, but we can see the change in shift what we saw in 2018 to 21, right? There are people who are completely know about it and ban about it. Now are the ones who are talking about here, this could be the future, and we should not miss out on that, or India should not miss out on that. And India missed out on the whole .com boom. Now India should not miss out on this whole crypto revolution that is happening. And that's sort of the mindset that current government has, which is amazing, right? So we see something positive coming over. Obviously, there will be some cliff and some bottom here and there when the regulation comes into place. But at least the intent behind this, and this is what is pretty exciting, and I'm really looking forward for this.
Great. I just have one more. So I have a question here very quickly. So if suppose there is what is the dispute resolution mechanism, for example? I know, because I come from the traditional setup, I'm like, acha, it'll go to SEBI, then it'll go to SAT, and it'll go to all of that, right? But is there for an investor any dispute resolution mechanism on your exchanges?
Yeah, so we do have a considerably very big team. The moment we grow them to 10x a big team, suddenly the whole market has gone by 20x. Then we end up hiring more people and trying to address them. But it's a good problem to have, right? This is the problem of scale. But we do have a lot of process in place, both from whether it's a financial problem or whether it's a scam or whatever different types of. We have compliance team, we have legal team, everybody working in sync trying to solve these issues, right? At this point, it is all done at the exchange level, and tomorrow we have a regulatory body. If so, then we will also have somebody on top where we can route these issues around.
So if there is a there is a dispute, then the resolution has to be between the exchange and the person dealing with the,
Yes,
the
absolutely.
between
Yes.
them right now.
Just to add on to that,
Sorry?
Just to add on to that, right? As long as the dispute is within the system, that's fine. But even when the dispute is with the exchange, right? Like, you can't complain to me about myself, right? I mean, you can't expect justice. So even in that cases, what I really want to tell people is that people keep saying, right, if I lose my Bitcoin, where do I go? It's not true, right? Look at countries where exchanges have got hacked. Look at countries where exchanges have not done a good job in terms of customer protection fund. They have been penalized by the government. So it's not true that if you're an unregulated exchange, you can just go about doing anything. Like, you have legal enforcement agencies that come to bite your back when you do that. So the saying that, oh, you're an unregulated exchange and you can do whatever you want and nobody will question is not necessary.
No, Sharon, I was just coming from the perspective of a very layman investor, right? A smaller investor. Obviously, you know, there is no. I think from there, just for their understanding that if there is, then obviously nobody wants to go into the whole legal piece and say, okay, I'm going to do this, etc. It's not even the
I have a chargeback request for 100 rupees. So my point here is that even if it's 100 rupees, you can still not necessary dollars.
Yeah. Absolutely. Sorry, Kashif, you were saying that something and I came in between, but I'll also like your view on why have we seen this lack of regulation or the government really dilly-dallying, RBI dilly-dallying and saying, acha, we won't allow it. And banks are very, even today banks, why are they so standoffish, right? They're like, it's like that something out there is invisible, right? So we don't want to acknowledge it. It's there, but we don't want to acknowledge it. So if you're doing it, don't tell us you're doing it. Like, what is this whole thing about?
So first of all, the major problem why people they get a little confused is the narrative which has been set up by the mainstream media. So whenever you take up a Hindi newspaper, because masses generally they read Hindi newspaper or an English daily, you will always find that so what happens that mainstream media since the early days, they have been projecting Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies in the bad light, and most of the confusion in the country is when you say unregulated. So most of the masses they think unregulated means illegal, right? So people do not even have a basic understanding, and it is fair enough. It is fine for a layman. Unregulated generally means that it is illegal. So there lies that confusion, and that confusion is escalated by the mainstream media's narrative as well. So on the other side, if you see, it is completely fine. It is completely legal to buy and to trade cryptocurrencies. And I would like to share a thought, information with the audience also, that most of the exchanges which are in the country right now are being, though it has no connection with the validity, but still the most of the cryptocurrencies exchanges which are being run by people from IITs and people from Amazon. It's like CoinSwitch. The guys are ex-Amazon. WazirX, the Crowdfire app. I mean, it is one of the world's most popular app. The founder and Siddharth, they have a decent and a very amazing background. CoinDCX, which is again a decent exchange backed by IIT. So this ecosystem is being managed by a very good, smart chap. First of all, now coming to the regulatory side, that why. So what is happening that the word cryptocurrency has a problem. If this would have been crypto assets or a digital asset, so from day one, this currency word has actually given a threatening to RBI, that they think currency is something which is like which can only be managed by a nation, and it can only be managed by RBI. It is their right only. Nobody else can issue a currency. So this currency word has actually generated a lot of problems and issues. Now, obviously, we are trying to convince them. Now they have a better understanding of it. Okay, that this is actually not a currency. This is an asset where people are trying to find value. They want to store their value in this in these currencies. And there are also currencies which are different types, like security, commodity, currency, and utility, right? So the problem is that, what is the main problem is that RBI has till date has not called any stakeholders. So there has not been an official meeting till date where the exchanges and RBI have sat across the table and tried to discuss this issue. And this you can give any reason for that, I don't know, But in many countries, why they are progressing on this thing? Because the stakeholders and the government, they are sitting across the table. In India right now, there has not been a single instance where there have been a discussion, and that lack of education is actually leading to the kind of situation we are into right now. But I'm sure the recent remarks of the finance minister are quite a bit hopeful that in coming days you might see another committee which has been formed, because the earlier committee proposed a ban, but in coming days you might see that the new committee might try and have a closer discussion with the stakeholders, and we might come up with a solution to it.
Great, super. And what is, Naimesh, to you, what is the liability of somebody who goes on to, suppose I choose to buy or sell cryptocurrency on an exchange? Just like all other exchanges, obviously there is, here there is, I'm assuming because it's blockchain, there is data, who's bought it, who's the last holder, etc. It's all sort of encrypted, but it's all there. But what is the liability of me as a customer? Is there a liability? Because again, we come back to the whole unregulated piece.
I think a little bit of incorrect information over there, as in, because we do have blockchain, but when we enter an exchange which is not a decentralized exchange, basically the platforms that are easy to use, such as CoinSwitch or WazirX, we are matching our order with another person, but we don't know who that person is. Okay, so when we buy or sell cryptocurrency, our liability, by liability, I don't think that we tend to lose anything. If you buy Bitcoin and if the exchange is successfully running, you have that Bitcoin which is currently in the custody of the exchange, and you can easily take it out if you want to, right? But exchanges obviously have also a right that you cannot defraud them, right? Like you cannot do something which is against the rules, and you cannot take money to it which is not from the legal sources. All those things, those are all mechanisms that the exchanges worry about, and they take care of them to the best possible way. But I also want to say that we strongly, right, advocate that your investment should be long term. It doesn't have to be 30 years, but it has to be at least 3 years, right? So, and it has to be steady and long term. So if that fund you are holding, like Bitcoin is the only asset, or cryptocurrencies are the only assets that you can actually possess yourself and not really keep it with someone else, right? So we strongly recommend that take out that Bitcoin, keep it in your wallets, private wallets that you hold. So the passwords or the private keys, we call it, that are in your control, rather than keeping it on an exchange, unless you are, of course, trying to trade, right? Otherwise, acquire them and keep it with yourself. That's the recommendation that I give to all the people. And in fact, the community in crypto is so good that even I'm sure that Sharan or Sid, they all give the same advice, despite them knowing that this is bad for business, right? But everybody gives the same advice, that it's the principle of cryptocurrency is decentralization, you being self-sovereign, you taking control of your money. So you should keep them with you when you are planning to hold it long term.
Actually, it's good for us, because we get nothing when you hold the Bitcoin with us. So that we will not sleep in peace.
Also, just a small point that also Naimesh gave a very good point. Just to add on to Naimesh's point, whenever a user, suppose somebody wants to enter into the crypto space for the first time, need to ensure that they give the right information to the exchanges. They do not try to fraud exchanges by giving the wrong KYC or a wrong address proof, number one. Number two, they need to ensure the source of money. So tomorrow, if a regulator comes up and say, "Hey, Sakshi, tell me, from where you've got those Bitcoins," so you need to ensure that you had the source of income, which you can explain to the regulator. Number three, if you make a profit,
is that not a part of the KYC that I'm sure you're asking? I mean, it's all part of the KYC, right? You're asking.
But source of income, exchanges, I don't know. I don't think so. Exchange ask for source of income. That is only in case, suppose tomorrow when you have Bitcoin on an exchange, and tomorrow if some regulator tomorrow asks you that from where you bought this Bitcoin, suppose, do you have any source of income to explain? You should have your details that you can tell them that from this source, this was the source of income from where you have bought this Bitcoin. And tomorrow, if you want to sell Bitcoin and you cash it in, if you have made profits, you need to pay applicable taxes. So that is the only three things which you need to ensure. It is not a free money. So there are taxes which you need to pay, and you need to take charge, control of things.
Great.
And also
okay, so let's come to sorry. Yeah.
It works on different levels, right? You have retailers who probably playing with some amount, so the KYC is what is needed is different. But the moment you jump up the ladder is when our team actually get in touch, and we do some extra bit of other formalities just to make sure things are safe at our end. But at a very base level, these KYC, bank verification, many other things are there. Bank verification is more like a surrogate trust that we work on. And then obviously if you are probably getting like say $1 million worth of cryptocurrency, then that's when the question comes in, is it okay for us, right? Like, because we want to be very healthy in terms of how we run our business. So we have like a certain bit of compliance that the compliance team works with, and make sure that things are safe.
It is easier to open an account in a bank in India rather than to open an account on a crypto exchange. They ask for 7-8 things. It irritates, because these guys are so careful. I mean, as a user, you tend to get scratch your head that why they are asking for so many things. They are playing so safe. And all credit goes to the exchanges. I know it is not easy, but they are doing the job.
Great, that's good to hear. And I think we'll just hop on to a little bit interesting topic, which is how do you make money? Like I've heard you can mine Bitcoins and you can turn your art into NFTs and sell it. And you can see that big smile on Tashi's face. I think she's very seriously thinking of jumping the fence and starting that. But
I actually tried my hand at NFTs. I paid like a lot of gas fees, and there have been 0 bids on my art. So I'm quite disappointed, and I decided not to list any more art as NFTs.
Welcome to reality check. You don't get rich overnight. Okay.
Yeah.
So
I was like, what is this madness? Let me try. And of course,
the person who made $69 million from the NFT, it might seem like an overnight success, but he made 5,000 paintings, right? Absolutely. One every day, digital art, and all of them clubbed into one was sold at $69 million. That's almost 15 years of work every day, right?
Absolutely.
And by the way, I used to follow him since 2016. By the way, I never knew about his NFT game. But I used to follow him because my brother was in the art, and so I used to just follow this guy. And every day he used to have a political post or something around it. And it's not just I don't know if you guys follow him, but it's not just an art. It's a 3D model. Like there's an animation there, and I always wonder how he does it. So I mean, obviously hard work pays, and very well for him. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a very interesting topic. Yeah, you had some questions on that.
Yeah. So I mean, first of all.
What is the future of NFTs? Do you think it is sustainable, or is it just a fad? And also, how do they work? Like, are people going to actually keep selling NFTs and the artists are going to keep getting royalties, or do you think all of this is actually going to end soon?
I don't know. Sorry, Tashi, if we can park this question for just a minute, because I've been going through the chat. And
yes, I actually wanted to jump to that. Are you talking about which question do you want to address? Yeah,
the one with the tax, right? Because that's my favorite topic to answer, and I love answering it. So I want to just take this opportunity. Listen, Anjana ji, if you kidnap someone and if you make money as ransom from it, you still have to pay tax on it. Right? You may go to jail for kidnapping someone, but you will go to double jail for not paying taxes on it. So it doesn't matter if crypto is unregulated or not. Whatever your source of income, you have to pay income tax on that income. So I just wanted to answer that. I love answering this question every time with the same way. So now let's talk about it.
And he's wearing a jacket today just to answer this question.
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry. Yes. Okay, now can we get on to NFTs? So I think that's very clear on the taxation. I think there is no sort of, I mean, I think it comes back to the same thing, that unregulated does not mean it's illegal, doesn't mean that you don't have to pay taxes. So yeah.
Right. Regarding NFTs also, let me start. Okay. I just want to say that, see, NFTs at the end of the day is non-fungible token. It's a token, right? And Sid started very well by saying that these all should be termed as tokens, different types of tokens. So what Bitcoin, Ethereum, and all those tokens are fungible tokens. They are the same, whether like across the border, across the platforms, it is the same, right? All 21 million Bitcoins are the same. Like they have the same value, they have the same properties. But non-fungible tokens are unique. They're not the same, they're unique. So now what we are doing is you're creating an art and you are attaching a token with it, which we call the non-fungible token, which is like a tracker system for it, right? So when you create a digital art, it is not on the blockchain. That digital art, whether it's a music, whether it's a painting, or whatever it is held somewhere else. It is just it is, and the token that we are talking about, the NFT, is actually just an indicator that this particular address is the owner of this particular art, which is residing here, right? So I can sell my time as an NFT. I can say that anyone who buys this particular piece of token will get 45 minutes with me as a personal session, and that could be a token, a non-fungible token, a unique token to sell, right? So the future of NFT, I feel, is that it's the proof that it gives, the authority that it gives to a certain piece of art, which is it is pointing to that this is real, this is where it has been, these are the owners that it has had, and right now it is residing at this place, and these were the transactions that happened. So NFT is definitely going to be the future, but we should not confuse it as itself being an art, right? It's just a certificate to an art, and the certificate is on blockchain.
More about authenticity. Yeah.
Right. I think that's a very well put. I mean, if you think about it, it's basically there are three things. One is the contract itself. Contract can say, hey, you know what, it is an art, whatever the definition of a contract can be. Contract can be about, whether it's an art, this is what it is. And then there's something called as creator who has created this, and there's something called as owners, right? Just like how you would have your, when you buy your car, you go to RTO, you just, register there, say, hey, you know what, this car belongs to this guy. The moment it gets transferred, there's an entry there in that saying, hey, this goes to that. So it's, in a mechanism point of view, this is basically what it is, right? Like and just to explain what non-fungible and fungible is, right? Like, so a good example I always think about is when you go to, OLX, and you probably try to look for, say, a bike, bullet bike. I'm sure you guys understand bullet bikes. Now, the thing is, even if each listing there is very different, even though it's the same bike, same probably year also, like, say, you want to put it like 2017, everything is 2000, but each one of them will have different price, and each one of them probably will have different characteristics. One would be probably ridden for, like, say, $1,000 kilometers. One would be for 50,000, etc., etc. So there will be multiple reasons why something would be unique there. So even though you can still call it like a bullet. You can still call it like Royal Enfield Bullet, but at the end it is different when you're on OLX, right? So this is the additional attribute that you get. But when, say, for example, when you're buying from showroom, it doesn't matter. You're just buying a red color one, and all the red color ones are same, right? So that's fungible. It doesn't matter which one you get. You just get to pick one of them from the lot, and that's yours. But not on OLX, right? So there's a bit of attribute that comes, and that's what we call it a non-fungible token. It's just a very simplified form. Now, coming to the part of whether it will be an art form, whether it will how this will grow. Now, like I said, right, today the most biggest use case is about NFT being around art, right? That's the thing that you guys know about. But a lot of people are working on different types of NFT. Like, for example, at WazirX, we just launched probably a month back, and already there's a evolution about how this can be into many things. we are now launching the music NFT, right? Like you have, a really big Indian artists coming together and trying to, build a product where essentially, I don't know if you know the licensing on music, right? It's very difficult. Like if you have a music, how do you pass on the license to different people? It probably, for example, Sony being a licenser, passes the license for you to use it on your product or whatever that is, right? Now, imagine all these being played at a very global level, right? Where you can license somebody to play certain things, you can license somebody else to do XYZ, or you can rent it out, or you can buy it out. Many things around it. We are yet to see that the whole industry go big on it, and it has. And when we talk about NFT, is the whole underlying thing is, we're just forgetting it's blockchain. That's fine. Now we're talking about bigger use case, bigger, adoption and a bigger, application of all these, technology that we are talking about. So there are a lot of things, I've been talking to a few other guys who are building basically a collateralized NFT where, if you have an NFT which is worth, say, XYZ, like say $1,000, you can basically collateralize it and, take a loan and then do something exactly same, like, how you would mortgage your house and do it, right? So that's the kind of space that we are working on. And then obviously there will be like goods and bads. But I love the whole experiment that is happening, and ultimately we are finding the winners and we are going towards that. And NFT, by the way, is not very new. It's been there for like a couple of years. In fact, a game market is more prevalent into NFT. You would see more games with NFT coming on board. And now is the artist market, which is great, like, led by, really good news that we are talking about. That has also encouraged, like, I can see the way even the WazirX NFT place has changed life for people, right? Like they've never thought about certain things, and suddenly it gives us a small glimpse of what is the future is all about, right? How it has become a platform where people can sell something, any digital art to the world, and have ownership being resold, right? Because today, if you go to an e-commerce portal and you buy a digital art, you can't resell it, right? There is no resale at all about it. So these are like very different form of activity that is happening, and it's pretty interesting, but very early to even say where it will go. But I'm definitely telling you, there is a lot more than what we see, and a lot of smart folks are working on it. And
I think NFT deserves a complete different session of its own, because I think at least
absolutely.
At least the Gen Z is very they're very keen to sort of understand a lot more about it, and I think we should do that session for sure. I promised all of you that we'll end in an hour. We are running a little over, but I still have two things that I want to hear from all of you. The first one is, of course, everybody listening. And if you've seen the chat, we've actually have questions around supports and resistance and all of that, which we'll take next. But just to begin with, I mean, just your advice to everybody who's thinking whether this is for me or not for me. Should I invest my money? Should I put my money? So beginning with you, Kashif, if you could just very quickly, just 2 minutes, because I know all of you have.
So basically, my advice to anybody who is trying to enter into this space is to look at this space with a perspective of a store of value, right? So like in a traditional finance, why you invest to hedge inflation, right? So today only there was this news that edible oil has increased by 100%. From 80 rupees, you are buying that edible oil for 180 rupees. The oil inflation is at around 11%. The CPI index, the inflation rate in the country is 6%. What does this mean? This means that if your income is not growing by 8 to 10%, you are actually in minus, right? So keeping in the scenario, these things, they push you to invest. So what you do, you try and invest in stocks, you try and invest in mutual funds, you try and invest in property, you try and invest in gold. Why you want to invest? You are investing to secure your future, to maintain your purchasing power of the money which you're earning today, right? So Bitcoin is just giving you that extra alternative. It is not saying that you leave other basket and I am the superhero and I'm going to save you. No, it is just saying, okay, till 2008, you didn't had any alternative. After 2008, after Satoshi Nakamoto gave you this amazing digital class where you can include Bitcoin as in your asset class and you can invest in it. And why you should actually consider this. And I'm not saying that you invest with 50%, but try and take small exposure.
Let's put it like this. If I had 100 rupees, how much do you think, even if it is asset allocation that you're recommending, how much of that money should I put into crypto?
For the average Indian investor.
Right. So
4 to 5%. Sorry, I just blurted out 4 to 5%.
No, so everybody has got different. Namish is 10 years younger to me, so he has that. I don't know why he's so conservative, but it all depends upon your age, right? That at what age group you fall into. Like in crypto, 70% people are less than 34 years of age. So if suppose somebody's at around 30 can take a bigger risk. So if suppose you have in totality 100 rupees, you should at least invest bare minimum of 25% into it, 20 to 25%.
And what if you're 45 and you're sort of, I mean, there's a lot of ifs and buts about it. So how conservative? What is your earning? What are your future goals? We do this day in, day out when we talk in Lakshmi. How to set financial goals, how to do asset allocation.
Yeah.
And there's no thumb rule, but just if it was you, how much money would you put?
First thing, what I ensure that I have taken life insurance. First, you secure your life. Second is medical insurance.
Kashif, all this I teach every day. This is my
4 pillars of financial planning. He's going to add the fifth, which is invest in crypto.
First, you have to have life insurance. Second, you have to have medical insurance. Third, whatever money you have, put it in Bitcoin.
Yeah, for me today it is a reality. But what I have done that I have not stopped my SIPs which are already running in a mutual fund. I have not touched them. I am allowing them to continue, but I'm not buying a new SIP into mutual funds. Whatever new steps which I'm taking, these are all in crypto. But since I'm an oldie and I understand this system quite well, so I am confident about my steps. But anybody who's today entering new in this space should allocate some a percentage to crypto. And when I say crypto, not the 7,887 tokens. Sorry, no. You only have to consider Bitcoin, and that too, suppose you want to invest 100 rupees in crypto. So you should actually go for 70 to 75% in Bitcoin and remaining 15 to 20% in Ethereum, and big no to Doge. So don't run. So whenever you take small steps, only Bitcoin and Ethereum in 70 to 30% ratio.
Okay.
So I think that's another question that a lot of people are asking. And Naimesh, once you get to answer this question, also do speak about, how do you go about choosing which coin to invest in?
I think that's part of this question. So, I mean, whatever ways you can. And not Kashif's 2 minutes, but your 2 minutes.
Okay. As I said, I know I interrupted Kashif, but I really am conservative, about crypto investment. And the reason is because you will automatically become more bullish. You will automatically become more liberal towards your investment once you learn about this space yourself, right? But until you don't know anything, listening to us will only get you information that we tell you. But when you start learning about it yourself, that's when you will understand how deeper this rabbit hole goes. So when you say 4 or 5% or even 10% of your investment portfolio should go into cryptocurrencies, that's the money that will not make you lose your sleep if the market goes down, say 20, 30, 40, 50%, right? So and then the second part is that you continuously invest, right? You don't do lump sum investment. When you do lump sum investment, you don't know which direction the market will go to. So the idea is, like, whatever you do with mutual funds or equity stocks or whatever, start an SIP. I'm sure WazirX and CoinSwitch are coming up with their automation in automatic investment plans for sure. So start an SIP, and when you do again 4 to 10%, when you do that, you will soon realize that you are catching the volatility. It is not affecting you that much. You are not losing your sleep. And then when you have time, you'll start researching it. Then you will see the value growth in it. Then you will put in more money in it. It is a cycle that you will go through, and very easily you will go through it, right? If you invest right now a lot of money, and please, Bitcoin, Ethereum, maybe 1%, 10% of your total crypto investment should go into some other coins. They have a lot of potential. Okay, I'm not gonna deny that. But whenever you will make money from that, it will be like a lottery winning. You will not manage it right. I am not even saying that you might not manage it right. I am telling you that you will not manage it right. You will gamble with that money and you will lose it, because this space is that fast and that innovative and that druggy kind of an addictive space. Okay, so please invest a little bit. Now, how do you choose where to invest? It's basically what has been here the longest. Bitcoin and Ethereum have been around the longest. When you zoom out of a chart, what is going up consistently? Bitcoin and Ethereum are going up consistently, right? That's why you put most of your money into that. What is new? When you want to invest something that is a little more risky but a lot more upside, what is new but which has a better team behind it, what is continuously developing. Okay, that's what you see when you want to invest in something that is new, and it has you feel like it has a lot more upside towards it in the future, right? So
Okay, great.
either old assets in Bitcoin or crypto, or new ones, you research the team, okay, and how much development has happened in that space.
I
Okay,
think that will
great.
be too much of
Great.
information for them.
Yes.
Sorry, what?
Okay,
I think
Sharan,
it's too much
from you.
for a newcomer.
Sharan from you.
I think after the drug comment, I think Sid and I are drug dealers.
Yes.
Because
That's,
of my
I don't think we just delete that. Okay, go on.
I think because of the virtue of the industry that I have, I've kind of spent a pretty good amount of time with veterans in the investment space, right? The who's and who's spent 20, 30 years. And some of the learnings that I've learned is that there is no one size fits all, right?
Sure.
It kind of really, it's like asking someone, what should I eat for lunch? You have to tell me a lot of things before, like, have you had breakfast? How
Yeah.
much do you eat? Right? Are you a vegetarian or a non-vegetarian? It's just that, right? So anybody who generally comes to Google and says how to invest is, I don't know, you shouldn't be investing, first of all. I think, but where it comes from is that there are a couple of things that you need to do, irrespective of what your size is that one, do not invest because your chacha ka beta said that, right? Or he made some money, because your chacha ka beta may not be that rich forever, right? With crypto. That's one thing. Second thing is do your own research. I see very often, and what Namish rightly said, greed take over. And I'm very happy to tell this, and I've told this to Namish before. I don't check prices. Because of that, I sleep really well. Right? So if you're a long-term investor, that what surprises today should not matter to you. Right? There's no point crying over whether it's $30,000 or $64,000. Doesn't make sense. But fundamental to all investment products that you invest in, one, do your own research. Do not put more money than you can afford to lose. Right? Third, best thing about crypto is that you can protect your own fund. So I would encourage people to kind of, take out your funds, store it with you. Again, my personal advice is that do that only if you have some sizable amount, right? Because if you want to store it in a ledger, it's going to cost like $8,000, right? There's no point storing ₹1,000 Bitcoin investment in ₹8,000 ledger device. So I think it's not a very sanitary checks that is true for Bitcoin or true for any asset class. I would stay away from asset allocation. I'm not a financial advisor. I don't want people behind me tomorrow. So yeah.
Great. Okay, Sid, the last word from you.
Yeah, I think this, like Sharan said, it's a very it's a very specific thing that is for you, right? First, I think the first question I would ask is to explore yourself. Who are you, right? Because you need two major questions. One is the risk that you can take and the time frame we are talking about. So if you are a trader, right, a trader is very time sensitive work, right? In general, it's a very time sensitive. You have to time it. You have to get in, get out. Many things around that. It's about timing. And when we talk about investor, it is more, what is more important for them is the value creation, right? Is there a value in this, right? Like not right now, but in future and time to come. So here both are very different, right? If you are into if you think you are an investor, then all you have to focus on is whether there is real value in it or not, right? If there is real value, you don't have to worry about it. For which, what you need to do, you need to do research. I mean, if it's Bitcoin, Ethereum, whatever it is, you need to do your research, because you are getting your spending money. Unless you're spending a very small amount and you don't want to worry about this, that's fine. But the moment it gets a little sizable, where if it might lose your sleep and and everything around it, then definitely it's something that you need to do research. Don't just get into it. If suppose you're getting into a new project, go and check out the team. You do all those other type of research and come to you can relax better, because if what you have invested in has great value and it's here to stay, then it's fine. If you think it's not, then obviously you have made a wrong choice, right? So these are things that you have to be.
And do not take a loan. That's at the end.
Yeah, I think don't do any leverage in general.
I think another thing that I keep telling people is, before you invest in crypto, go read why not to invest in crypto, right? Go through the list, see if it even if you're still convinced that you should go ahead and do it, then you really don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, I mean, so one of our biggest worries on the community has been, and which I think I've individually spoken to all of you when I spoke to you, was that we have women who are putting in, for example, their savings, right? Which is, say, for a particular financial goal. And, once they put it in, then it's also across points, right? Saying, okay, maybe this one, maybe that one. And it is essentially a lot of stories that, okay, this one has doubled their money or this has happened. But there's a lot more that goes into, and I think we see the same things for even equity, right? We say you have to understand wherever you're putting your money. First, you should understand about it before you put your money in. And I think the same exists for crypto as well. And I think it's been an interesting conversation. I hope the women who are watching have taken away something. There is a lot of question also around information. Where do we find that information? Where do we look for? Because there's an information overload. How do we sort of get the right information? So we have Naimish, we have Kashif here. That's what they do. They share a lot of information. But I love also Sharan's point that, before you go and start investing, do read up of why not to invest into cryptocurrencies also, because once, it's only when you're very sure that this is for me is when you get into it. And once you do, there is a lot of information available. It's important to then look at the right exchanges, the ones who are here for some time, who have their, sort of compliance and everything that they're doing themselves, because of the environment right now. But we are hoping that going forward, this is something that that does get regulated, and there is a lot more interest from not just our investor community and the women here and the youngsters, but also from the financial community. So great. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your time. And I think this has been great. And I think Naimish warned me that this is not going to end in an hour, and rightly so. I think there's just so much to speak about. But thank you very much, everyone. And probably we'll call you as guest speakers on our community one by one, I think, given the number of questions we are getting. So thank you, Tashi. Anything else that...
No, thank you so much. Thanks everyone for joining us today. It was a great talk.
I
still have a lot of questions.
I just want to add this here. I mean, everybody is about investing, right? But more than investment, right? There's a lot that can be done in terms of crypto is by participating in it, and not just by putting your money, but by using your skills. Whether it's Naimish talking, writing content around it, whether it's Kashi who's talking about the laws of the land, and everything around that. So even for women out there, and all the girls, we have seen a lot more people in this industry, right? Like women entrepreneurs and women leaders who are actually taking a step into this. So I guess don't just stand on that edge. Probably try to see if there is an opportunity here, and probably if you jump in, you probably have more knowledge than a lot of people around there, by the way, because the industry is that early in wherever we are. So there's an opportunity for you, even for you to grow, and not just by investing, but by being in this industry. So take that step.
Great. I think learning is very important. I mean, like we said, Lakshmi doesn't offer cryptocurrency, nor do we advise on cryptocurrency. But I think we are also here to learn. We're learning, and I think it's important to keep in touch with what is happening, what are the different opportunities, and like we said, who knows? You might make an NFT which is going to make you loads of money. So yes, thank you.
I'm going to be checking out my bid every day, like I do every morning, waiting to make some good money.
Tashi, send it to me, please. I'll put it on Twitter. Maybe we'll get some bids.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, guys.
Have a good night. Thanks.
Have a
Bye.
good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.